Ever heard a sound that shouldn't be there? Not a scary sound, mind you, but a small, persistent one, like a faint heartbeat coming from under your car? Before we begin, if stories like this touch your heart, please like the video, subscribe for more, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're listening from. It means a lot to us. It was late October, in the perpetually damp embrace of the Pacific Northwest. Rain wasn't falling, it was hanging. A thick, gray mist clung to everything, turning the world outside Maya's small, rented bungalow into a watercolor painting blurred at the edges. The air smelled of wet cedar, decaying leaves, and the faint, metallic tang of the old Ford Focus parked in her gravel driveway. Inside, the air was heavy too. Heavy with silence, and the kind of quiet that only settles when loneliness moves in and pulls up a chair. Maya traced the rim of her cooling mug. 2 years. 2 years since the cancer had finished its slow, cruel work and taken David. 2 years, and the ache hadn't faded, it had just changed shape. Settled deeper, like sediment at the bottom of a still lake. Her daughter, Chloe, 8 years old and fiercely bright, was asleep down the hall. The only light in Maya's life, a light that sometimes felt terrifyingly fragile, like a single candle in a vast, drafty room. She worked long shifts at the hospital cafeteria, came home bone-tired, poured everything into Chloe, and then sat in this quiet. Sometimes, she'd pick up David's old flannel shirt, still hanging on the back of the bedroom door, and just hold it, breathing in the ghost of his woodsy soap, until the fabric felt damp under her cheek. The car, the Focus, was David's too. A practical, unassuming thing he'd bought used just before Chloe was born. Now it was Maya's lifeline, ferrying Chloe to school, Maya to work, groceries home. Lately, it had developed a cough. A worrying rattle, especially on cold mornings. Money was tight, impossibly tight. The thought of a mechanic's bill sent a fresh wave of that familiar, cold dread pooling in her stomach. She'd been putting it off, hoping the rattle was just dampness or imagination. Then, the sound started. Not the engine rattle. Different. Smaller. The first time, Maya had just pulled into the driveway after a late shift. The engine ticking as it cooled, the gravel crunching under her worn sneakers, the distant hoot of an owl. Then, a faint scritch-scritch, like tiny claws on metal. She'd stopped, head tilted, listening hard. Nothing. Just the sigh of the wind in the tall firs. Probably a branch, she'd told herself, shrugging off the shiver that wasn't entirely from the chill. But it happened again and again. Always when the engine was cooling, or just before dawn. A rustle, a soft, almost inaudible mew, muffled, as if coming from deep within the earth. Deep within the car. Maya started paying attention. She'd walk slower to the front door, pausing by the car. She'd crouch down, peering into the shadowed cavity beneath the chassis, smelling the familiar cocktail of engine oil, wet asphalt, and something else? Something faintly animal? Musky and wild. One rain-lashed afternoon, she saw it. Just a flicker. A blur of sodden gray fur, vanishing into the dark space behind the front wheel well as she approached the car. Her breath hitched. Not a mouse. Too big. Too cat-shaped. She knelt, ignoring the cold gravel biting her knees, and peered into the gloom. 2 points of light, low to the ground, reflected the weak daylight. Eyes. Wide, unblinking, terrified. "Hey there," Maya whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse, sounding loud in the damp quiet. The eyes vanished. Just gone. Like they'd never been. She didn't tell Chloe. Not yet. The kid had begged for a pet forever, a kitten especially. But Maya couldn't afford vet bills, food, the responsibility of another fragile life depending on her. The thought felt like another weight pressing down on lungs already struggling for air. And this creature, this phantom under her car, it wasn't a pet. It was wild, scared, probably feral. It lived in the belly of a machine that might cough its last any day. The absurdity of it, the sheer vulnerability, twisted something inside her. She started noticing other things. Tiny, almost invisible paw prints, like damp asterisks, on the dusty driveway leading towards and disappearing under the car. Once, a single perfect feather, gray and white, lay near the front tire. Another time, a tiny smear of something dark, like oil, but thicker, near the same spot behind the wheel well. Blood? Her stomach clenched. She began leaving things. Not consciously planning, just doing. A shallow saucer of water, tucked discreetly near the tire, out of the worst of the rain. The next morning, it was empty. Scratches in the dirt around it. Then, half a can of tuna, left on a scrap of foil late one night, after Chloe was asleep. By dawn, it was gone. Only the foil remained, licked clean, gleaming dully in the weak morning light. Maya found herself listening, not just for the car's rattle, but for the tiny sounds beneath it. Standing at the kitchen window, mug forgotten, staring out at the mist-shrouded driveway, waiting. Hoping for a glimpse. That flicker of gray. Those watchful eyes. It felt absurd, but also strangely necessary. Like tending to a tiny, secret flame in the overwhelming damp. One frigid morning, the coldest yet, frost etching delicate patterns on the windshield. Maya scraped it clear, her breath pluming white. She turned the key. The focus coughed, rattled violently, and then tight. Completely. Dead silence, except for the frantic hammering of Maya's own heart. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded her. Late for work. Chloe late for school. No money for a tow truck, let alone repairs. The weight, the constant, gnawing weight of it all, crushed down. She rested her forehead on the cold steering wheel, closing her eyes against the sting of tears she couldn't afford to shed. And then she heard it. Not a rattle, not a scrape. A sound, so soft, it could have been the wind sighing through the pines, or the creak of the cooling engine. But it wasn't. It was a purr. A low, tentative rumble, vibrating up through the floor of the car. Fragile, but unmistakable. It seemed to come from directly beneath her seat. A tiny engine, humming in the darkness, where her own engine had failed. Maya froze. The tears stopped, suspended by sheer disbelief. That sound, in the midst of her cold panic, was like a single, unexpected note of warmth. A tiny, living thing, hidden in the metal heart of her broken-down life, offering, what? Comfort? Solidarity? Or just the simple, undeniable fact of its own existence, persisting against the cold? She didn't move. She just sat there, forehead pressed to the wheel, listening to that impossible purr vibrating through the soles of her shoes. The cold dread was still there. The mountain of problems hadn't shrunk an inch. But layered over it, like the thinnest possible veil of warmth, was something else. Curiosity, yes. But deeper, a flicker of connection, fragile as a spider web glistening with dew. Something small and wild and scared was sharing this cold, broken space with her. And in that shared vulnerability, in the quiet hum beneath the silence, Maya felt the first, almost imperceptible, shift. A tiny crack in the ice around her heart, letting in a sliver of light she hadn't known she needed. Something important, something utterly unexpected, had begun. Not with a roar, but with a purr, hidden deep within the dark. That purr, it didn't fix the car. It didn't magically refill Maya's bank account or lessen the ache when she passed David's flannel shirt in the morning. But in the frozen silence of the dead Ford, with frost etching patterns on the inside of the windshield, it was a lifeline. Thin, fragile, but real. A tiny, vibrating heartbeat echoing up through the metal floor, right beneath her feet. It was the sound of another living thing, clinging on, just like her. Maya didn't know how long she sat there, forehead pressed to the cold steering wheel, listening. The panic, the crushing weight of the dead engine and everything it represented didn't vanish. But it receded just a fraction, pushed back by the sheer, improbable wonder of that sound. Something was down there, something alive, and choosing in that moment to hum its quiet song into the cold. Eventually, practicality clawed its way back. Chloe needed to get to school. Maya needed to call in late, again, and somehow find a tow truck she couldn't pay for. She took a shaky breath, the air sharp in her lungs, and slowly lifted her head. As she opened the car door, the hinge groaning loudly in the still morning, the purring instantly stopped. Silence rushed back in, deeper somehow without it. A pang of loss, absurdly sharp for something so fleeting, stabbed through her. She didn't peer under the car. Not then. The moment felt too fragile, too easily shattered. Instead, she focused on the immediate crisis, her movements stiff, mechanical. Calling a colleague for a ride for Chloe, the forced brightness in her voice making her throat ache. Arranging a tow with the mechanic down the road. Dave, a bear of a man who'd known David, his gruff voice softening when he heard her own strain. "Don't you fret, Maya. We'll get a looked at. Pay when you can." The kindness, the debt, was another stone in the heavy bag she carried. While she waited for Dave's flatbed, Maya found herself in the kitchen, not making coffee, but opening another can of tuna. The cheap, flaky kind. She scooped half onto a small, chipped saucer, the scent sharp and briny. Instead of leaving it near the tire like before, she hesitated, then carefully placed it on a dry patch of gravel directly beneath the front bumper, where the deep cavity behind the wheel well opened into shadow. Close to where she'd seen those eyes. Close to where the purr had vibrated. She retreated quickly, back to the kitchen window, heart thudding against her ribs. She watched. The mist hadn't lifted, just shifted, swirling in lazy eddies. Minutes crawled by. Nothing. Doubt gnawed at her. Had she imagined the purr? Was the cat even still there? Maybe the failed start had scared it off for good. The thought brought an unexpected tightness to her chest. Then movement. A shift in the deep shadow beneath the bumper. A slow, cautious extension of a small, gray head. Pointed ears twitched, scanning. A narrow, wary face, dominated by large, green-gold eyes, reflecting the dull light. They darted everywhere, up at the house, down the driveway, to finally settling on the saucer. The cat, for it was undeniably a cat, though painfully thin, ribs visible even beneath the thick, water-darkened fur, stayed frozen for an agonizing minute. Every muscle taut, ready to vanish. Maya held her breath. "Please." A tentative paw stretched out, touched the gravel beside the saucer. Retreated. Another stretch, closer this time. Finally, with a speed that was startling, the cat darted forward, snatched a large chunk of tuna, and retreated instantly back into the dark cavity. Maya caught a glimpse of matted fur along its flank, and the faintest hint of white on its chest. It ate its prize hidden, the only sound a faint, rapid crunching, barely audible through the glass. It didn't come out again while Maya watched. But the saucer was empty when Dave's tow truck rumbled into the driveway later, gravel spraying. She felt a small, ridiculous victory. A connection made. Food accepted. The focus was gone for 3 days. 3 days where Maya borrowed an ancient, wheezing hatchback from a neighbor, a constant reminder of her own precarious situation. 3 days where the driveway felt strangely empty, silent. She still put out food each evening on a piece of foil now, tucked near the foundation of the house, sheltered by a low bush. And each morning, it was gone. But she saw nothing. No flicker of gray. No watchful eyes. The phantom was still there, but deeper in hiding, perhaps spooked by the noisy departure of its metal den. When the focus returned, sporting a new, used alternator and a bill that made Maya's stomach clench, the first thing she did, after the obligatory deep breath, was not start the engine. She crouched down, beside the front passenger wheel well. The familiar scent of engine oil, damp earth, and now, faint, greeted her. She peered into the darkness. "Hey," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "You still in there?" Silence. Then, the softest rustle. Not a retreat, but a shift. And then, 2 points of light, low in the shadows. Watching her. Not vanishing this time. Just watching. Assessing. Maya stayed perfectly still, her knees protesting on the cold gravel. She didn't reach out. Didn't make a sound. Just met that unblinking gaze in the gloom. She started calling it Ghost. Not out loud, not to anyone else. Just in her head. Because it was gray, silent, and seemed to exist mostly in the periphery. A shadow with eyes. The routine deepened. Maya's life was a tightrope of work, exhaustion, and the constant hum of low-level anxiety. But Ghost became a quiet anchor, a small, secret ritual in the margins. Every evening, after Chloe was tucked into the story's red lights dimmed, Maya would step outside into the cool, damp air. She'd fill the small water bowl she'd bought, a cheap, blue plastic thing, and place it beside the sheltered spot near the bush. Then, the food. Sometimes tuna, sometimes a spoonful of plain chicken from her own dinner, sometimes just dry kibble she'd started buying in small bags. She'd place it down, whisper, "Here you go, Ghost," and retreat to the porch step, sitting in the dark, wrapped in David's old sweater, the one she now wore constantly, its familiar scent a thin shield against the world. She learned its rhythms. Ghost was strictly nocturnal. It emerged only in the deep quiet after the house lights went out and was always gone before dawn. It never approached while Maya was visible on the step. But she could hear it. The delicate lap at the water bowl. The soft crunch of kibble. The occasional, almost inaudible chirp or murmur, sounds she'd never heard from a cat before. Sounds that felt private. She learned its body language through glimpses in the weak porch light or the gray dawn. It moved with a liquid grace, but there was a stiffness sometimes, a slight hitch in its step on the left hind leg. She noticed how its fur, though thick, was patchy in places, especially along the tail, showing pale, scarred skin beneath. She saw the way it froze, statue still, at the slightest unfamiliar sound, a distant car, a barking dog, the creak of the porch step. Its fear was a tangible thing, a current running just beneath the surface. One rainy night, a week after the car returned, Maya sat on the step, the hood of David's sweater pulled up against the drizzle. She'd had a brutal day, A confrontation with a dismissive supervisor, a call from Chloe's teacher about her quietness in class, a final, crushing notice about a late bill. The loneliness, the sheer weight of doing it all alone, pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Tears, hot and silent, tracked down her cheeks, mingling with the rain. She didn't sob, just let them fall, feeling utterly, invisibly broken. She heard the soft crunch of gravel. Ghost emerged from the bushes, a darker shadow in the wet gloom. It paused, head lifted, scenting the air. Its gaze, those luminous green-gold eyes, locked onto Maya, sitting huddled on the step. Maya held still, barely breathing, expecting it to bolt. But it didn't. It took a few cautious steps closer, towards the food bowl near the porch edge, closer to Maya than it had ever come while she was visible. It stopped, maybe 3 feet away. Not looking at the food, looking at her. In the dim light, Maya saw its ears weren't flattened in fear, but slightly forward. Curious? Wary? Yes, but present. It sat down, right there on the wet gravel, wrapping its thin tail around its paws. It didn't purr. It didn't approach. It just sat, watching her cry. The silent, still witness in the rain. It was the strangest comfort Maya had ever known. Not a hug, not a word, just presence. The simple, undeniable acknowledgement that she existed, that her pain was seen by another living creature in the cold, wet dark. The cat's stillness, its quiet watchfulness, mirrored her own frozen grief, yet somehow held space for it. Maya wiped her cheeks with the damp sleeve of David's sweater, her tears slowing. She didn't move. Neither did Ghost. They just stayed like that, human and cat, separated by a few feet of rain-slicked gravel, sharing the heavy, damp silence. A tiny island of connection in a vast ocean of loneliness. The next morning, when Maya went out to check, the food was gone. But beside the empty blue water bowl, pressed into the soft mud near the foundation, was a single, perfect paw print. Clearer than any she'd seen before. Not a hurried dash, but a deliberate mark. 4 toe pads, and the faint pad of the heel. A signature left in the earth. Maya crouched down, tracing the outline with her fingertip. It felt like a message. Fragile, tentative, but undeniable. The ice around her heart, cracked by the purr in the dead car, thawed another fraction. She wasn't just feeding a stray anymore. She was building, brick by tiny, unseen brick, a bridge across the dark. And somewhere deep in the engine bay of her life, a small, wild heart was starting to beat a little less fearfully, in time with her own. The paw print was a revelation, a fragile contract written in mud. After that rainy night, Ghost didn't magically transform into a lap cat. It remained a creature of shadow and periphery, its presence measured in emptied bowls, fleeting glimpses, and the soft, almost imagined sounds of its nocturnal life beneath the car or in the bushes. But the fear, the sheer terror that had radiated from it in those first encounters, began to recede, replaced by a watchful caution, a tense curiosity that sometimes, just sometimes, edged towards something resembling tolerance. Maya found herself looking forward to those quiet evenings on the porch step. Wrapped in David's sweater, the scent of him fading but still a comfort, she'd sip lukewarm tea and watch the dark shape emerge. Ghost moved differently now. Less like a startled deer, more like a wary diplomat. It would eat, sometimes pausing to glance towards Maya's silhouette on the step, its ears swiveling to catch every rustle of fabric, every sigh. Once, it even sat for a full minute after eating, meticulously cleaning a paw, seemingly oblivious. though Maya sensed the intense awareness humming beneath the surface. It was progress, measured in inches, but it felt monumental. Chloe inevitably discovered the secret. She'd woken thirsty one night, padded to the kitchen, and froze at the back door window. "Mommy," she'd whispered the next morning, eyes wide with wonder. "There's a cat. A gray one. By the bush." Maya's heart had clenched. She'd managed to keep Ghost a secret, a small, private thing, shielding both the cat and Chloe from the potential heartbreak of its inevitable wildness, or worse. But the wonder on Chloe's face, so pure, so reminiscent of the light David used to bring into a room, was impossible to deny. Carefully, Maya explained about the sounds in the car, the hidden eyes, the shared tuna. About Ghost's fear, its wildness. "She's very shy, sweetheart," Maya said, kneeling to meet Chloe's earnest gaze. "She's lived outside a long time, and she gets very scared. We have to be quiet and gentle and never chase her. We can watch and leave food, but she might never want to be a pet like other cats." Chloe nodded solemnly, absorbing the responsibility like a sacred vow. From then on, she became Ghost's silent champion. She'd draw pictures of a gray cat with enormous green eyes, leave tiny offerings of her own crackers or cheese beside Maya's evening meal, and sit pressed against the back door glass at dusk, her small face a picture of rapt concentration. This fragile equilibrium held until the scratching started. It began subtly, a faint, intermittent scraping sound, barely audible over the usual night noises, the dripping gutter, the wind in the pines. Maya, sitting on the porch step one evening, dismissed it as branches against the house. But the next night, it was louder, more persistent, a rhythmic, grating scritch, 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 coming not from the bushes or the car, but from the side of the house, from the old, rarely used garage. The garage was a relic, David's domain, packed with the detritus of projects half-finished, gardening tools, boxes of things Maya hadn't been able to bring herself to sort through after he died. The door was stiff, rarely opened. The thought of venturing inside, of disturbing the dust-covered memories, was still physically painful. She kept it locked. Out of sight, out of mind, a tomb for unprocessed grief. Ghost, however, seemed fixated. Maya noticed it first during her evening watch. Instead of vanishing into the bushes after eating, Ghost would slink along the foundation towards the garage door. It would pause, sniff intently along the weathered wood, particularly near the padlocked handle, and then the scratching would start. Not frantic, but deliberate. Persistent. Claws on wood. Scritch, 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 scritch. Night after night. Always at the garage door. Always near the lock. Curiosity warred with unease in Maya. Why there? Was it mice? Rats nesting inside? The thought made her skin crawl. But Ghost's behavior didn't seem like hunting. It lacked the coiled intensity, the predatory focus. This was different. Purposeful. Almost frustrated. One afternoon, while Chloe was at a friend's, Maya forced herself. The key to the padlock felt cold and heavy in her hand, like lifting a stone off a grave. She took a deep breath, the damp air thick in her lungs, and turned it. The lock clicked open with a sound that echoed too loudly in the quiet driveway. She heaved the garage door upwards, its rollers protesting with a shriek that sent birds scattering from the nearby trees. Dust motes danced in the sudden shaft of gray afternoon light that pierced the gloom. The smell hit her first. Dust, mildew, old motor oil, and beneath it, the faint, lingering scent of David's sawdust and pipe tobacco. A wave of grief, sharp and fresh, washed over her. She stood on the threshold, paralyzed by the sheer volume of him still contained within. His workbench, tools laid out as if waiting for his return. Stacked boxes labeled Chloe's baby clothes, taxes 2018 to 2020. David's winter gear. A dusty mountain bike leaned against the wall. It was overwhelming. She stepped inside, her footsteps loud on the concrete floor. She scanned the dim corners, looking for signs of rodents, nests, anything that might explain Ghost's obsession. Cobwebs draped from the rafters, but no droppings. No chewed boxes. Nothing stirred in the shadows. It felt still, abandoned, haunted only by memories. She was about to leave, the weight of sadness pressing down, when a flash of gray caught her eye. Ghost. It stood just outside the open garage door, frozen in the patch of weak sunlight. Its body was rigid, ears flattened against its skull, eyes wide, pupils dilated into huge black pools. It wasn't looking into the garage, not exactly. Its gaze was fixed, intensely on the far wall. Near the back, beside David's old metal filing cabinet. A cabinet Maya knew was locked, containing papers she hadn't dared to touch. Ghost didn't bolt. It didn't even seem to register Maya standing there. Its entire being was focused on that spot on the wall, a low, guttural sound vibrating in its throat. Not a growl, not a hiss, something deeper, more distressed. Then, slowly, deliberately, it took one step forward, over the threshold, into the garage. Its eyes never left that far wall. Maya held her breath. Ghost had never willingly entered an enclosed space with her present. Its fear of confinement was palpable. Yet here it was, inside, radiating tension so thick Maya could almost taste it, metallic, like fear. It took another step, then another, its movements stiff, hackles slightly raised. It wasn't approaching her. It was drawn, magnetically, towards the back of the garage, towards that locked filing cabinet. Ghost, Maya whispered, her voice cracking the heavy silence. The cat flinched violently, as if shocked. It whipped its head around, saw Maya, and pure terror flooded its expression. With a yowl that ripped through the dusty air, a sound of utter panic, Ghost spun and exploded back out the door, a gray blur vanishing into the thick rhododendrons beside the house. Gone. Maya stood alone in the cavernous silence, the echo of that terrified yowl hanging in the air. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The grief, the confusion, the sheer strangeness of it all pressed in. Ghost's fixation wasn't random. It was specific, obsessive, and whatever lay behind that focus near David's locked cabinet filled the cat with a terror deeper than its fear of humans, deeper than its fear of confinement. She looked at the filing cabinet, a squat, gray metal sentinel in the gloom. David had kept important documents there. Bills, titles, insurance papers. Things she'd avoided, unable to face the finality they represented. What could possibly be there, or associated with there, that would evoke such a visceral reaction from a feral cat? It made no sense. A shiver, unrelated to the garage's chill, traced its way down Maya's spine. That night, Ghost didn't come for its food. Maya sat on the porch step long after the damp had seeped through her jeans, listening. The night was unnervingly silent. No crunch of gravel, no lap of water, no soft chirps, only the dripping gutter, and the wind, and the heavy, unanswered question hanging in the air. The scratching didn't resume either. It was as if Ghost's brief foray into the garage, and the terror it unleashed, had severed the fragile thread of trust they'd been spinning. The paw print in the mud felt like a distant memory, The purr under the car, a dream. Maya retreated inside, locking the door. She leaned her back against it, the silence of the house pressing in. Chloe's peaceful breathing drifted from her room. David's sweater felt suddenly heavy, scratchy. The locked garage, the locked cabinet, the locked-away parts of her own grief, it all felt connected now. Tangled. Ghost's unexplained terror had become a mirror, reflecting her own buried fears back at her. Something was deeply wrong. Not just with the car, or the bills, but with the hidden story unfolding in her own driveway. The comfortable rhythm of cautious feeding and quiet observation was shattered. Curiosity had curdled into a low thrum of anxiety. What secret lay buried in the dust of that garage? A secret that terrified a wild creature, and perhaps held a key to the very thing Maya had been too afraid to unlock. The silence outside felt less like peace, and more like the held breath before a storm. The silence after Ghost fled the garage wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a presence. Heavy, ominous. It pressed against the windows, seeped under the door, filled Maya's small kitchen like a physical weight. The familiar comfort of her evening ritual, the porch step, David's sweater, the anticipation of a gray shadow was gone, replaced by a hollow dread. Ghost didn't come that night, or the next. The food bowl sat untouched, the water grew still and dusty. The driveway felt abandoned, haunted only by the echo of that terrified yowl. Chloe sensed the shift. "Mommy?" she asked, her small face pressed against the cool glass of the back door, scanning the twilight bushes. "Where's the gray kitty? Is she scared because we opened the big door?" Maya's throat tightened. She couldn't explain the unexplainable terror she'd witnessed, the chilling specificity of Ghost's fixation. "She might be extra shy right now, sweetie," Maya managed, her voice rough. "We just need to be patient." But patience felt like sand slipping through her fingers. Every night of silence deepened the pit in her stomach. Had she driven Ghost away forever? Had her clumsy intrusion into David's space severed the only fragile thread of connection she'd found? The garage door remained closed, the padlock snapped back into place. But it wasn't just locked, it felt charged. A silent question mark hanging in the damp air. Maya found herself avoiding that side of the house entirely. Walking Chloe to the neighbor's borrowed car felt like crossing a minefield. Her gaze would skitter away from the weathered wood, from the spot where Ghost had sat, transfixed with terror. David's locked filing cabinet loomed large in her mind, a metal tomb holding what? What could possibly resonate with such primal fear in a feral cat? The absurdity warred with the chilling certainty that something was deeply wrong. Ghost's fear had been too absolute, too targeted. It wasn't just the garage, it was that spot. 3 days of silence stretched into 4. The low hum of anxiety in Maya's chest escalated into a constant, grating whine. Work was a blur of forced smiles and robotic movements. Chloe grew quieter, retreating into her drawings of the gray cat. The weight of everything, the loneliness, the financial strain, the car's lingering fragility, and now this gnawing mystery and potential loss, pressed down until Maya felt she might crack. She slept fitfully. David's sweater clutched tight, haunted by images of wide, terrified green-gold eyes vanishing into darkness. Then, on the 5th night, a sound. Not scratching. Not a purr. A low, guttural moaning. A sound of pure distress, animal and raw, coming from beneath the Ford Focus. Maya shot upright in bed. Chloe was asleep, undisturbed. The sound wasn't loud, but it cut through the quiet house like a knife. It wasn't Ghost's usual fear hiss or startled yowl. This was different. Deeper. Agonized. She threw off the covers, David's sweater instantly around her shoulders like armor, and hurried downstairs, her heart hammering a frantic tattoo against her ribs. She didn't turn on any lights. Fumbling in the dark kitchen, she grabbed the small flashlight she kept by the back door. Outside, the mist had thickened into a light, cold rain. It plastered her hair to her forehead instantly. The moaning sound was clearer now, a rhythmic, pained keening, definitely emanating from beneath the car. Maya's breath caught. Ghost was back, but something was terribly wrong. She crouched low, ignoring the icy gravel biting her knees, and shone the flashlight beam under the chassis. The weak yellow light cut through the oily darkness, illuminating tangled wires, the undercarriage, and then Ghost, huddled deep in the cavity behind the front passenger wheel, well, her refuge. But she wasn't hiding. She was lying on her side, trembling violently. Her breathing was rapid, shallow, whistling slightly. Her eyes were half closed, glazed with pain, reflecting the flashlight beam with an unnatural sheen. A dark stain, glistening wetly in the light, matted the fur on her left flank. Blood. And near her head, a small, dark shape lay motionless. A dead rat? No, smaller. A mouse. But it wasn't whole. It looked torn. Savaged. Ghost. Maya whispered, her voice trembling as much as the cat's body. Oh, sweetheart, what happened? Ghost flinched at the sound, tried to lift her head, and let out another weak, agonized moan. Her body convulsed slightly. The bloodstain looked fresh, recent. Panic surged, cold and sharp. It was the middle of the night. Rain was falling. She had no carrier. No money for an emergency vet. No one to call. The sheer helplessness was paralyzing. Ghost was dying. Right here. Right now. Under David's car. Because Maya hadn't understood, hadn't acted, hadn't unlocked the secret that terrified her. The locked garage. The filing cabinet. Ghost's obsessive scratching. Her terror. It all crashed together in Maya's mind. This wasn't random. The mouse, the blood, Ghost's distress. It was connected. Had to be connected. And whatever it was, it had hurt Ghost. Badly. No, Maya breathed, the word escaping on a puff of white vapor in the cold rain. No, you don't get to leave like this. The helplessness crystallized into a fierce, desperate resolve. She couldn't save David. She couldn't fix her life overnight. But she could not let this small, wild creature suffer and die alone under a car because of a mystery she'd been too afraid to solve. She scrambled to her feet, her legs numb. The keys to the padlock felt like ice in her hand. She didn't think. Didn't hesitate. She ran through the rain, not to the car, but to the garage door. The padlock was stiff, cold metal biting her fingers. She fumbled, dropped the keys, scooped them up with shaking hands, finally got the key and turned it. The clunk of the lock opening was swallowed by the rain. She hauled the garage door upwards. It shrieked in protest, the sound echoing in the wet darkness. The smell of dust, oil, and David rushed out. She didn't pause. She grabbed the flashlight again and strode inside, the beam cutting a shaky path through the gloom, straight towards the gray metal filing cabinet in the back corner. Her heart was a wild drum against her ribs. Fear warred with urgency. What was she looking for? What could possibly be here that explained Ghost's terror and her injury? She pulled at the top drawer. But the middle drawer. But the bottom drawer. She rattled the handle. But frustration and panic welled up. She shone the light around the cabinet base, looking for a key taped somewhere, anything. Then, the beam caught something near the bottom corner of the cabinet. not on the cabinet itself, but on the concrete floor directly beneath it. A small hole gnawed through the baseboard of the wall behind. Rodent activity? Her light followed the faint scuff marks on the dusty floor, leading away from the hole, towards the back corner of the garage, where stacks of old newspapers and cardboard boxes were piled. Ghosts scratching hadn't been at the cabinet lock itself, she realized with dawning horror. It had been near the base, near that gnawed hole. Trying to get under? Trying to reach something behind the wall? Driven by a frantic energy, Maya shoved aside a mildewed box of Christmas decorations. Behind it, tucked into the corner where the wall met the floor, was a loose section of the baseboard. It looked chewed, warped. She knelt, ignoring the grit on her pajama pants, and pulled. The rotten wood gave way easily, splintering in her hands. Behind it, not in the wall cavity, but wedged into the narrow space between the back of the filing cabinet and the wall, was a small, flat, rectangular object. Dust-covered, mouse-chewed at the corners. Maya reached in, her fingers brushing cold metal and stiff paper. She pulled it out. It was a cheap, plastic document holder. The kind with a snap closure. Faded blue. Covered in dust and cobwebs. One corner was shredded, likely by rodents nesting nearby. This was what Ghost had been fixated on? This flat, innocuous thing? Hands shaking violently, Maya fumbled with the stiff snap. It popped open. Inside were papers. Folded. Yellowed with age. She pulled them out, unfolding them carefully under the flashlight beam. The top page was a veterinary bill. The letterhead was familiar, Pine Creek Animal Clinic. Dated. Maya's breath hitched. Dated just 2 months before David died. Her eyes scanned down. Patient name, Gray Lady. Species, feline. Breed, DLH, domestic long hair. Color, gray/white. Age estimate, 2 to 3 years. Owner, David Henderson. David Henderson. Maya's vision blurred. David? David had taken a cat to the vet? He'd never mentioned a cat. Never. She scanned the services. Emergency exam. Wound debridement and sutures, left hind leg, flank. Antibiotics. Pain management. The total at the bottom made her wince. It wasn't insignificant, especially then, when medical bills were already piling up for David himself. Why hadn't he told her? She flipped to the next page. It was handwritten. David's familiar, looping scrawl filled a page torn from a notepad. Dated the same as the bill. My stuff found her last night near the old mill. Hit by something, maybe a car. Leg mangled, big gash on her side. Scared spitless. Took her straight to Pine Creek. Doc says she's tough. No chip, no collar. Probably. Doc says she'll likely bolt the second she's able. But couldn't just leave her. Reminded me of that stray pup we found on our camping trip. Remember? The one you nursed back? Cost a bit, use the emergency fund, I'll replace it. Keeping her quiet in the garage for now, in that old dog crate in the back corner. Don't want to upset Chloe if she doesn't make it. Or get her hopes up. She's hidden away, safe. Called her Gray Lady for now. We'll update when she's out of the woods. Love you. D. Maya's legs gave out. She sank onto the cold, dusty concrete floor, the flashlight beam wobbling wildly. Tears streamed down her face, hot and silent. She hadn't known. He'd hidden it. Hidden the injured cat, hidden the expense, hidden this small, secret act of profound kindness, because he didn't want to burden her or risk disappointing Chloe. He'd carried this alone, just like he'd tried to carry his own illness until he couldn't. And Gray Lady, Ghost, she had bolted, as soon as she was able, vanishing back into the wild. But she'd remembered. She'd remembered the smell of this garage, the place where a kind man had saved her life. She'd remembered the pain, the confinement, the terrifying vulnerability. That's why she scratched. Not for mice. She was trying to get back to the place she associated with both salvation and agony. Trying to reach, what? The crate? The memory? And the dead mouse, the blood on her flank. She must have encountered a rodent near that old nesting site, perhaps defending a territory she remembered, or just startled, and re-injured her old wounds in the fight. Ghost wasn't just a stray. She was David's last secret act of compassion. A living, breathing legacy he'd left behind, hiding under Maya's car, drawn back to the place where her life had been saved and terrified of the memories it held. The sobs finally came. Deep, wrenching sounds that tore from her chest, echoing in the dusty cavern of the garage. Grief for David, sharp and fresh. Guilt for not knowing, for not seeing his quiet burden. Overwhelming empathy for the small, terrified creature outside, who carried her own physical and emotional scars. And beneath it all, a fierce, protective love. For David's memory. For this cat he'd saved. For the fragile thread connecting them all. She didn't know how long she sat there on the cold floor, clutching David's note, crying for everything lost and found. But eventually, the raw edge of the grief softened, leaving a profound exhaustion and a clear, burning purpose. Ghost needed help. She wiped her face roughly with David's sweater sleeve, smearing dust and tears. She shoved the vet bill and the precious note into the pocket of her pajama pants. She grabbed the flashlight and ran back out into the rain, towards the car, towards the pained Keening. Kneeling again in the gravel, she shone the light under the car. Ghost was still there, trembling, her breathing labored, eyes dull with pain and fear. But this time Maya looked at her and didn't just see a stray. She saw Gray Lady, David's last act of love. A survivor. Part of their story, all along. Okay, sweet girl, Maya whispered, her voice thick but steady. David helped you once. Now it's my turn. She reached out, slowly, deliberately, not towards Ghost's injured flank, but towards her front paws, resting weakly on the gravel. I know you're scared. I know it hurts. But I'm here. Like he was. I'm not leaving you. Ghost flinched, a weak hiss escaping her. But she didn't try to scramble away. Her energy was gone. Her eyes, clouded with pain, fixed on Maya's outstretched hand. Maya held her breath. Inches separated her fingers from the damp, matted fur of Ghost's paw. Then slowly, tremulously, Ghost stretched her neck forward. Not to bite, not to flee. She nudged her nose, cold and wet, against the tip of Maya's index finger. A touch as light as a falling leaf. A silent surrender. A transfer of trust from the man who had saved her to the woman who held his memory and now held her fragile life in her hands. The connection wasn't just made. It was forged in shared pain, shared memory, and the undeniable, echoing legacy of David's quiet kindness. The locked doors, both literal and in Maya's heart, were finally, wrenchingly open. The storm hadn't passed, but in that cold, wet darkness, under a broken-down car, a tiny, battered heart chose to beat against Maya's fingertip. And Maya, holding the echo of her husband's love in one pocket, and the living proof of it trembling under her touch, knew what she had to do. The breaking point wasn't an end. It was the terrifying, necessary start. The touch. That cold, wet nose pressing against her fingertip in the rain-lashed darkness beneath the car. It wasn't just contact. It was a key turning in a lock Maya hadn't fully realized was jammed shut. David's note, crumpled and damp in her pajama pocket, pulsed like a second heartbeat against her thigh. Ghost, Gray Lady. David's last secret act of love, trembling and bleeding before her, had chosen trust. In that fractured, rain-soaked moment, the paralysis shattered. Action flooded in cold and sharp, cutting through the lingering haze of grief and shock. Maya didn't hesitate. The borrowed hatchback. The emergency vet clinic 20 miles away, the only one open at this hour. She moved with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. Wrapping Ghost carefully, agonizingly gently, in David's thickest flannel shirt, the scent of him enveloping the trembling creature, she created a makeshift nest in a sturdy cardboard box lined with towels. Ghost offered no resistance, just a low, pained whimper that vibrated through the fabric against Maya's chest as she carried her to the car. Chloe slept on, mercifully unaware of the midnight drama. The drive was a blur of rain-smeared headlights, the frantic drumming on the roof, and the shallow, rasping breaths from the box on the passenger seat. Maya kept one hand resting lightly on the flannel bundle, whispering reassurances she wasn't sure Ghost could hear. Her own voice choked. "Hold on, Gray Lady. Just hold on. David wouldn't let you down, and neither will I." Saying the name David had given her felt like unearthing a buried treasure, bittersweet and potent. Gray Lady. It fit her dignity, her hidden history. The fluorescent glare of the emergency clinic was jarring. The sterile smell of antiseptic, the muffled sounds of other nighttime animal emergencies, the tired eyes of the triage nurse. Maya, in her rain-soaked pajamas and David's sweater, felt exposed, vulnerable, clutching the box containing her fragile, bleeding link to her husband. Explaining was a stumbling mess. The feral cat, the old injuries, the fight, David's note, the vet bill. The nurse's professional mask softened slightly at the mention of Pine Creek and David's name. "Dr. Evans is still here, knew your husband," she said quietly, taking the box with surprising gentleness. "We'll take a look." The wait was interminable. Maya sat on a hard plastic chair, David's sweater pulled tight, shivering despite the clinic's warmth. She unfolded the damp note again, tracing David's looping script under the harsh lights. "Couldn't just leave her." His quiet words echoed in the sterile silence. How many other small kindnesses had he performed, burdens shouldered alone, to protect her? The guilt was a fresh ache, layered over the older grief. But beneath it, blooming slowly, was something else, a profound gratitude. He hadn't just saved a cat, he'd unknowingly left a guide, a bridge back to his own enduring compassion, hidden under their car. Dr. Evans emerged eventually, his face etched with the weariness of the late shift but his eyes kind. "Gray Lady," he said, the name sounding natural on his lips. "Tough old girl. She's stable." Relief, so intense it was dizzying, washed over Maya. He explained. The blood was mostly from torn stitches on her old flank wound, ripped open during the fight with the rodent. The leg injury, the original one David had treated, was aggravated but not broken. Severe bruising, infection brewing in the reopened wound, dehydration, exhaustion. "She's been through the ringer," he said, "but she's a fighter. We've cleaned her up, resutured, given her fluids and antibiotics, strong pain meds. She's resting." He paused, looking at Maya directly. "David, he brought her in that night. Near midnight. She was in bad shape. He was determined." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Paid cash, insisted on the best care, wouldn't leave until she was stable. Never mentioned her again. We assumed she didn't make it, or bolted. He shook his head slightly. Ferals rarely stick around after that level of trauma. Amazing she came back. Amazing you found her like this. Maya swallowed the lump in her throat. She found us, she whispered. The bill was daunting. Even with Dr. Evans discreetly adjusting some fees, it was a sum Maya simply didn't have. Pay what you can when you can, he said firmly, echoing Dave the mechanic. David was good people. We'll work it out. The kindness, the network of small-town decency David had woven, felt like a safety net Maya hadn't known was there. It was another piece of him returned to her. Bringing Gray Lady home at dawn, heavily sedated and swaddled in clean clinic blankets inside a proper carrier, felt like bringing home a secret finally unveiled. Chloe, wide-eyed and breathless, met them at the door. Maya explained gently, omitting the worst of the terror and blood, focusing on David's role. Daddy saved her? Chloe whispered, tears welling. And she came back? The wonder in her voice, the connection forged across time to the father she missed so fiercely, was almost too much to bear. They set up a recovery station in the quiet corner of the living room, a large dog crate borrowed from a neighbor, lined with soft towels and Maya's own fleece robe for familiar scent. David's flannel shirt became her bed. Gray Lady slept deeply, the drugs keeping the pain at bay, her breathing even but shallow. The raw, sutured wound on her flank was a stark reminder of the night's brutality. Maya watched her, the fierce protectiveness of physical ache. This wasn't just a stray anymore. This was David's legacy. The days that followed settled into a new, tender rhythm. The constant, low-grade anxiety about money, the car, the future didn't vanish. But it was overlaid now with the immediate, consuming focus of care. Maya's world narrowed to the rhythm of medication schedules, painkillers, antibiotics administered with trembling hands and whispered encouragement through the crate bars. Changing the bandage on Gray Lady's flank was a delicate, heart-pounding operation, requiring Maya to move with slow, deliberate calm while Chloe watched, wide-eyed, holding gauze pads. Gray Lady, woozy and hurting, tolerated it. Barely. Her eyes would follow Maya's movements, wary but without the abject terror of before. The trust, born under the car in the rain, was being tested and slowly, brick by brick, rebuilt in the quiet light of the living room. The fear didn't disappear. When the sedation fully wore off, Gray Lady startled violently at sudden sounds. She flinched if a hand moved too fast near the crate. The confinement clearly agitated her, a reminder of the cage in David's garage. She'd paced the limited space, a low, distressed rumble in her throat, her gaze fixed longingly on the window. But she didn't lash out. She didn't revert to pure feral panic. She watched Maya. She watched Chloe. She learned their voices, their movements. Chloe became Gray Lady's quiet champion. She'd sit cross-legged on the floor near the crate, reading picture books aloud in a soft, steady voice. She'd sing gentle songs. She'd carefully push little treats, bits of chicken, flakes of tuna, through the bars with a wooden spoon, her small face a picture of solemn concentration. "It's okay, Gray Lady," she'd murmur. "Daddy loved you. We love you too. You're safe now." The simple, unwavering acceptance in her words was a balm. Maya saw Gray Lady watching Chloe, the tension in her body easing fractionally when the child was near. The large, green-gold eyes held less panic, more a deep, watchful exhaustion. Maya found herself talking to Gray Lady. Not baby talk, but quiet reflections as she cleaned or administered meds. She talked about David. Small memories. How he loved hiking in the rain, just like this persistent northwest drizzle. How he always burnt the toast. How he'd read Chloe stories with ridiculous voices. She talked about the loneliness, the fear of failing. She talked about finding the note. "He saved you," she'd whisper, her fingers gently brushing the bars near where Gray Lady lay, wrapped in David's flannel. "And somehow, you brought a piece of him back to us." Slowly, incrementally, Gray Lady responded. First, it was the slow blink. Maya would catch her gaze and deliberately close her eyes, holding it for a few seconds. One day, tentatively, Gray Lady blinked back. A cat's, "I trust you." Maya's breath caught. Then, a low, rusty purr started. Not the deep, resonant purr of a content house cat, but a tentative, vibrating hum, like an engine trying to turn over after years of disuse. It happened when Chloe sang. When Maya spoke softly about David. When the pain meds eased her discomfort. It was fragile, easily startled into silence, but it was there. A sound of returning life, not just survival. The garage padlock remained off. Maya went in one sunny afternoon, not with dread, but with a quiet purpose. She cleaned. Not a purge, but a careful sorting. David's tools, his winter gear, Chloe's baby clothes, they were packed with more tenderness than pain. She found the old dog crate, tucked away in the back corner, dusty but intact. She didn't bring it inside. Its association was too fraught. But she acknowledged it. She found the spot behind the filing cabinet, now patched crudely by her own hands. She stood there, breathing in the dust and the lingering ghost of sawdust and pipe tobacco, and felt not terror, but a profound sadness softened by gratitude. David's secret wasn't a burden anymore. It was a gift. A testament to the quiet, enduring kindness that had been the core of him. The focus still rattled. The bill still loomed. The loneliness still crept in at night. But the texture of life had changed. The air in the small bungalow felt different, lighter, somehow, even with the scent of antiseptic and cat. The routines now included the soft chime of medication alarms, the careful preparation of special food, Chloe's whispered stories to the crate. Gray Lady's presence was a quiet anchor, a living reminder that love, even hidden, leaves echoes. That vulnerability, met with compassion, could forge bonds stronger than fear. One crisp morning, about 10 days after the emergency vet visit, Maya opened the crate door for a bandage change. Gray Lady, moving more easily now, her flank healing cleanly, didn't retreat to the back. She stayed near the front, watching Maya's hands. As Maya finished, securing the fresh gauze with gentle hands, Gray Lady didn't flinch. Instead, she slowly, deliberately stretched out her neck. Not for food. Not to sniff. She pressed the top of her head, warm and solid, against the back of Maya's hand where it rested on the crate floor. A deliberate, unmistakable request. A head bunt. Cat affection. Cat trust. Maya froze. Tears welled, hot and sudden. She didn't pull away. She let her hand rest there, absorbing the warmth, the softness of the gray fur, the gentle pressure. Gray Lady closed her eyes, a low, steady purr rumbling through her body and into Maya's hand, vibrating up her arm. It wasn't the frantic purr of the dying car engine. It was the deep, resonant hum of an engine finally running smooth. Of a heart finding its rhythm again. Not just Gray Lady's. Maya's too. She looked out the window. The mist was lifting, revealing the deep green of the firs against a pale blue sky. The constant rain had eased into a soft, sparkling drizzle. The driveway gravel glistened. The old Ford Focus sat there, still rattling, still needing work. But it wasn't just a broken-down car anymore. It was the unlikely shelter where David's last act of love had hidden and waited until it was needed most. The ice around Maya's heart, cracked by a purr in the dark, wasn't just thawed. It was gone, replaced by a fragile, resilient warmth born in a rainy driveway, nurtured in whispered secrets and shared pain, and solidified now by the trusting head of a gray cat named for a kindness she was finally coming home to. The quiet shift that began under the car had become a gentle, unstoppable tide, washing them all towards a shore they hadn't known existed. Life, in the weeks after Gray Lady's head bunt, settled into a rhythm that felt less like survival and more like living. A fragile, precious kind of living, woven through with the soft threads of healing. The crate door stayed open permanently now. Gray Lady, her stitches removed, her flank a neat line of scar tissue beneath the regrowing fur, explored the small bungalow with the cautious curiosity of a visitor from another world. She didn't become a lap cat overnight. She remained herself, a creature shaped by wilderness and pain, now navigating the unfamiliar terrain of domesticity. She claimed spaces, not the center of the room, but the edges. A patch of sun on the worn living room rug. The top shelf of the bookcase, surveying her domain like a small, gray sphinx. The corner behind the armchair, where she could observe unseen. Her movements were still quiet, deliberate, but the frantic tension, the readiness to bolt, had eased into a watchful calm. She learned the sound of the can opener, appearing silently in the kitchen doorway, her green-gold eyes fixed expectantly on Maya. She learned Chloe's bedtime routine, often curling up on the rug just outside the child's door as stories were read, a silent, furry sentinel. The purr, that tentative, rusty hum deepened. It became a regular soundtrack to evenings. When Maya sat on the sofa, exhausted after work, Gray Lady might eventually, cautiously, leap up beside her. Not touching. Not yet. But close enough that Maya could feel the warmth radiating from her thick fur, hear the steady vibration of contentment as she kneaded the blanket. It was a profound comfort, a physical manifestation of peace, earned through shared trauma and patient care. Chloe's bond with Gray Lady was pure, uncomplicated devotion. She talked to her constantly, soft streams of consciousness about school, friends, dreams, and Daddy. Gray Lady listened, blinking slowly, sometimes stretching out a paw to gently touch Chloe's outstretched hand. The child drew endless pictures, Gray Lady sunbathing, Gray Lady watching birds, Gray Lady wearing a tiny, imagined crown. She taped them proudly to the refrigerator, a gallery of love. Maya watched them, her heart a complex tapestry of gratitude and lingering sorrow. David's absence was still a palpable thing, a chair left empty, a laugh missing from the air. But Gray Lady was a living thread connecting them to him, a testament to his unseen kindness. The vet bill and the precious, mouse-nibbled note lived in a small wooden box on Maya's dresser, alongside David's wedding ring and a smooth stone he'd picked up on their honeymoon beach. Physical touchstones of love, both enduring and lost. One rainy Saturday afternoon, the kind of rain that drums steadily on the roof and blurs the world outside, Maya finally tackled the last untouched corner of the garage. The filing cabinet. With Gray Lady now a permanent resident inside, the garage had lost its oppressive weight. It was just a space again, holding memories, not imprisoning them. She'd sorted through most of David's things weeks ago, donating tools he'd barely used, carefully packing away others, folding his winter coat into a storage bin with a sprig of lavender Chloe had picked. But the locked filing cabinet, the epicenter of Ghost's terror and David's secret, had remained untouched. A final door. She found the key taped to the bottom of David's old toolbox, a place so obvious she'd somehow overlooked it for years. Her fingers trembled slightly as she inserted it into the top drawer lock. It turned smoothly. The drawers slid open, releasing the faint scent of paper and dust. Inside, the expected folders labeled taxes, car titles, insurance, house. Organized. David's practical hand. Maya methodically went through them, finding nothing unexpected, just the sobering paperwork of a life interrupted. She felt a pang, but no fresh wave of grief. This was closure. Necessary. The bottom drawer was heavier. It contained thicker folders labeled Chloe School, Chloe Art, Chloe Medical. Maya smiled faintly, tracing the labels. David had been meticulous about their daughter. Beneath these lay something else. A large, flat, cardboard portfolio, the kind artists use. Maya didn't remember it. She lifted it out, surprised by its weight, and carried it into the living room away from the garage dust. Gray Lady, curled in a tight circle on her favorite sunpatch rug, lifted her head, watching Maya settle at the small kitchen table. Chloe was painting at her easel nearby, humming softly. Maya brushed dust from the portfolio's cover. There was no label. She untied the fraying string that held it closed and opened it. Inside weren't documents. Not exactly. It was a collection, a carefully curated archive of her. Maya. Tucked into protective sleeves were dozens of small sketches, quick, fluid pencil drawings on napkins, coffee-stained notebook pages, the backs of receipts. David's drawings. Maya hadn't known he drew. Not like this. They captured moments, fleeting, intimate glimpses she hadn't realized he'd seen or cherished. Maya reading, brow furrowed in concentration, a shaft of afternoon light catching her hair. Maya laughing, head thrown back, captured mid-gesture. Maya asleep on the sofa, looking impossibly young and peaceful. Maya heavily pregnant with Chloe, hands resting on her belly, gazing out the window with a look of quiet awe. Maya holding newborn Chloe, exhaustion and fierce love etched onto her face in equal measure. Maya gardening, dirt smudged on her cheek, a determined set to her jaw. Page after page, year after year, David's love rendered in graphite. The lines were sometimes shaky, sometimes incredibly sure, capturing not just her likeness, but her essence, her strength, her tenderness, her moments of vulnerability, her fierce concentration. He saw her, really saw her, and he'd preserved it, quietly, secretly. Tears blurred Maya's vision. She hadn't known. He'd never shown her. Had he thought they weren't good enough? Had he intended to give them to her someday? Or were they simply his private way of holding on to the woman he loved, especially as his own strength began to fail? The portfolio spanned years, right up until a few months before his diagnosis became undeniable. The last few sketches were simpler, quicker, but no less loving. Maya making tea. Maya tying Chloe's shoelaces. Chloe, drawn by her mother's quiet tears, came over. "What is it, Mommy?" She peered at the open portfolio. Her eyes widened. "Is that you? Did Daddy draw you?" She touched the plastic sleeve over a sketch of Maya reading to a toddler Chloe on her lap. "He drew me too." Maya pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of paint and childhood. "He did," she whispered, her voice thick. He saw us, really saw us. Gray Lady had padded over silently. She didn't jump on the table, but sat beside Maya's chair, looking up at her, then at the drawings, her tail tip flicking gently. It felt significant, as if she understood this was another piece of the man who had saved her, revealed. Later that evening, after Chloe was asleep, Maya sat on the sofa, the portfolio open beside her. Gray Lady, after a moment's hesitation, did something she'd never done before. She didn't just jump near Maya, she jumped onto her lap. Not tentatively, but with a quiet certainty. She circled once, twice, kneading Maya's thigh through the fabric of her sweatpants, her purr a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated through Maya's bones. Then she settled, a warm, solid weight, tucking her nose under her tail, closing her eyes. Maya froze, then slowly lowered a hand. She didn't reach for Gray Lady, just let her hand rest on the sofa cushion beside the cat's body. Gray Lady didn't flinch, didn't open her eyes. Her purr deepened. Maya's fingertips brushed the incredibly soft fur behind Gray Lady's ear. The cat leaned infinitesimally into the touch. Tears welled again, but they were different this time. Not tears of grief, or even overwhelming gratitude. They were tears of awe at the intricate, unexpected tapestry life could weave. A feral cat, hiding in a dying car, had led her not just to her husband's secret act of compassion, but back to his secret, enduring vision of her. His love, captured in pencil, witnessed now by the creature he'd saved, and resting warm and alive in her lap. Gray Lady wasn't just David's final gift to them. She was the key that unlocked this final, precious chamber of his heart. The portfolio wasn't just drawings. It was a mirror, a reflection of how deeply David had seen her, cherished her, in all her ordinary, extraordinary moments. It was a message from beyond the silence, whispering, "This is how I saw you. This is how I loved you. You were always beautiful to me." Maya sat there for a long time, Gray Lady a warm, purring anchor on her lap, the rain drumming a soft rhythm on the roof. She traced the lines of David's sketch of her laughing, the joy captured so perfectly it almost hurt. She looked down at the gray cat, this unexpected bridge between past and present, between loss and love. The final gift wasn't the cat, or even the drawings. It was the profound, heart-stopping realization that love, true love, didn't vanish. It transformed. It hid in engine bays and locked drawers and the quiet persistence of a wild creature. It revealed itself in sketches on napkins and in the trusting weight of a cat who finally felt safe enough to come home. Not just to a house, but to a heart that had been waiting, without even knowing it, to be seen and warmed again. The mystery that began with scratching in the dark had ended, not with a solution, but with a revelation written in graphite and purrs and the quiet, enduring echo of a love that never truly left. Time, in the way it does after a profound shift, began to fold itself around the new shape of their lives. The relentless Pacific Northwest rain softened into the gentler showers of late spring, then the hazy, golden stillness of summer. The damp air carried the scent of warmed earth, blooming rhododendrons, and the faint, clean aroma of the sea, even miles inland. The small bungalow, once echoing with absence, hummed now with a different frequency, the quiet clink of a cat's water bowl, Chloe's laughter bubbling over like a creek freed from ice, the low, contented purr that had become the soundtrack to their evenings. Gray Lady, Ghost, was undeniably home. Not as a project completed, but as a presence woven into the very fabric of their days. She remained a creature of quiet observation, often found perched on the windowsill, watching the world outside with her wise, green-gold eyes, or curled in a sunbeam like a patch of living velvet. But the wariness, the ever-present tension of flight, had dissolved. It was replaced by a profound stillness, a watchful peace. She navigated the rooms with a quiet confidence, her stiff-legged gait a permanent reminder of her past, but no longer a symbol of fear. It was simply part of her story, etched onto her body, just like the scar on her flank, a testament to survival, and now, to sanctuary. The transformation wasn't just hers. Maya felt it within herself, a slow, deep settling. The crushing weight of loneliness hadn't vanished. Grief, she understood now, wasn't something you overcame, but something you learned to carry differently. Yet the paralyzing dread, the feeling of being perpetually on the verge of drowning, had receded. In its place was a quiet resilience, a strength she hadn't known she possessed, forged in the fires of loss and unexpectedly tempered by the trust of a wounded, wild creature. David's portfolio lived on the small bookshelf now, not hidden away. Chloe loved to leaf through it, tracing the pencil lines of her father's hand, pointing out sketches of Maya, of herself as a baby. "Look, Gray Lady," she'd say, holding a drawing near the cat. "Daddy drew Mommy's smile just like that." Gray Lady would blink slowly, sometimes stretching out a paw to gently touch the plastic sleeve, as if acknowledging the connection. It wasn't morbid, it was a bridge. David wasn't a ghost haunting their present, he was a warm memory woven into its tapestry, his love made tangible in graphite and in the steady presence of the cat he'd saved. Maya found herself smiling more. Not the forced, brittle smiles of before, but genuine ones that reached her eyes. She still worked long hours, the bills still demanded careful juggling, the old Ford Focus still rattled its familiar, slightly alarming song. But the rattle didn't spark panic anymore. Sometimes, when she turned the key, Maya would smile faintly, remembering the impossible purr that had echoed from its depths on that frozen morning. The car wasn't just a burden, it was a relic, a character in their story, the unlikely vessel that carried a hidden blessing back to them. Her relationship with Gray Lady deepened into a language of subtle gestures and profound understanding. The head bunts became frequent, a warm pressure against Maya's hand, her leg, her cheek when she bent low. Gray Lady would often follow her from room to room, settling nearby, a silent, comforting shadow. At night, she'd begun a new ritual. After Chloe was asleep, Gray Lady would jump onto Maya's bed. Not demanding attention, but curling up at the foot, a warm, purring weight at the edge of the blankets. It was a simple thing, that presence in the dark. But on nights when the old ache for David threatened to surface, or worries about the future pressed in, feeling the steady vibration of Gray Lady's purr, the soft rhythm of her breathing, was an anchor. A reminder that she wasn't alone. That love, in its many forms, persisted. One warm Saturday afternoon, Maya was pulling weeds in the small patch of garden beside the driveway. Chloe sat nearby on a blanket, chattering to Gray Lady, who observed the proceedings with regal detachment from a shady spot under the rhododendron bush. The sun felt good on Maya's back. The scent of damp soil and green growing things filled the air. She heard the familiar, slightly wheezy rumble of Dave the mechanic's truck pulling up next door. Dave lumbered over, wiping his hands on a rag. "Car still holdin' up, Maya?" he asked, his voice a familiar rumble. Maya sat back on her heels, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her glove. "Still rattling, Dave," she said, a smile in her voice. "But she gets us where we need to go." Dave chuckled, his gaze drifting to Gray Lady under the bush. That the famous engine cat I heard about? Heard she's quite the character. He crouched down slowly, making no sudden moves. Hey there, pretty lady. Gray Lady watched him, alert but calm. She didn't retreat. After a moment, she blinked slowly at him. Look at that, Dave murmured, a note of wonder in his gruff voice. Seen plenty of ferals in my time. Takes something special to come around like that. He looked back at Maya. Your David, he had a way with critters, didn't he? Quiet soul. Knew how to listen. He tapped the side of his head. Animals sense that. Maya felt a familiar lump rise in her throat, but it was softer now, wrapped in warmth. He did, she agreed softly. He really did. Dave stood up, nodding. Well, you tell that rattletrap when she's ready for another look-see, you know where I am. Pay when you can. He gave Gray Lady another nod. You take care now, little survivor. He ambled back to his truck. Maya watched him go, then looked at Gray Lady. The cat was now meticulously cleaning a paw, utterly unperturbed. Chloe had drifted over and was gently stroking Gray Lady's back. The cat arched slightly into the touch, her purr audible even from a few feet away. It struck Maya then, with a clarity as sharp and clean as the summer light, what the true meaning was. It wasn't just about rescuing a cat or being rescued by one. It was about the invisible threads that connect us. How a man's quiet act of compassion, hidden away in grief and practicality, could echo years later. How a wild creature, carrying the scars of trauma, could instinctively seek out the scent of that kindness, even when it terrified her. How vulnerability, met not with force, but with patient presence and a saucer of tuna, could build a bridge stronger than fear. How a child's unwavering love could be the gentlest healing balm. How grief could slowly transform, not into forgetfulness, but into a deeper appreciation for the love that was, and the love that still remained. It was about second chances. For a cat who learned to trust again. For a woman who learned she could still love fiercely, even with a broken heart. For a child who found a connection to her father in the soft fur of an unexpected friend. It was about how family isn't always blood or even species. It's about who sees you, who stays, who chooses to purr beside you in the dark. Gray Lady finished her paw, stretched luxuriously, exposing the pale fur of her belly and the neat scar on her flank, then padded over to where Maya sat. She didn't demand anything. She simply sat beside her in the warm dirt, leaning her flank lightly against Maya's leg. Her purr vibrated softly against Maya's skin. Maya rested a hand lightly on Gray Lady's head, feeling the solid warmth, the soft fur, the steady, reassuring hum of life. She looked around. At Chloe, now drawing in a notebook, her brow furrowed in concentration. At the old Ford Focus, gleaming faintly in the sun, its engine silent for now. At the bungalow, no longer just a house, but a home filled with visible and invisible histories. At the garden, struggling but persistent, pushing green shoots through the dark earth. Life wasn't perfect. It was still messy, still challenging, still marked by the rattle of uncertainty. But it was full. Full of the ordinary miracles of a purring cat, a child's laughter, the scent of warm soil, and the enduring echo of a love that had woven itself into the very air they breathed. The storm hadn't just passed, it had nourished the ground. The hidden heart that once beat beneath the car engine now beat steadily, trustingly, pressed against her leg in the sunshine. And Maya knew, with a certainty that settled deep into her bones, that the greatest rescues aren't always dramatic. Sometimes, they happen slowly, quietly, one shared meal, one tentative touch, one per at a time. They happen when a hidden heart finds its way home, and in doing so, shows you the way back to your own. The story may end here, but the feeling lingers. If this tale of an unexpected hero, hidden kindness, and the quiet power of love finding its way home touched your heart, please let us know. Give this video a like. It tells us these stories matter. Subscribe for more journeys into the extraordinary moments hidden within ordinary lives. We'd love to hear where in the world you're listening from. Drop us a comment and share your own corner of the globe. Share this story with someone who might need a reminder of hope's quiet persistence. And tap that bell icon so you won't miss our next story, delivered with the same warmth and care every single day. Thank you for listening, truly. Until next time.